Good morning, Kim. Happy hump day to everybody. Sorry I'm late with this content, but it's been 2 years since Chadwick Carr went missing from the Foundation House in Clinton, Tennessee. He is an East Tennessee native from Blount County, and somebody knows where he is and what happened to him. This is the said commentary. Thank you for your time.
I begin tonight talking about something that really happened 2 years ago. 2 years since Chadwick Carr went missing from Anderson County. No updates on his whereabouts since then. Well, one team who was close to Carr wanted to honor him and bring attention back to the case. WT6 on your side, Ella Wales is in the studio and has more on that story. Ella.
Dawn, Chadwick Carr was last seen near the intersection of North Central and Morelia Avenue in Knoxville back in 2021. His disappearance impacted Maya Hill and her parents as he was an important figure in their lives. That's why this prom season she wanted to have something that would make his presence felt. Maya says she was surprised by a family member with this photo after telling them how she wished Carr could be there with her this prom season.
I know if he was here, that he would have been there, and he would have been there to support me and take pictures of me and just be there lighting everybody's spirit up and just being there for us, just making everybody laugh. And I knew he would have been there.
She says Carr always showed up for big events in her life.
So he actually took me to the father-daughter dance because my dad couldn't make it. He had to work, so he stepped in, he took me, and that was it was amazing. That was one of the best nights of my life, and then knowing that he was there to do that for me and take me, that was one of the last memories I had with him, so that meant something very big to me.
Carr's been missing since May 2021, and his sister Whitney says there's been no leads in the case.
We haven't had anything updated since he's been missing, since the actual day, the first 2 weeks that he disappeared. It's really been like a dead end, completely stopped, like nobody cares at this point. So we're just praying and hoping that something comes about.
Despite the lack of progress in finding him, his family is determined to find out what happened.
I'm in it for the long haul. It's not going to stop. It's going to be always ongoing until we find Chad.
His mother, Krista Carr, says she hopes people will continue to.
I just want to say thank you. I don't think I've done that. Is to say thank you for the ongoing search. And maybe we could come up with something new or another angle to find Chad.
Hill says she doesn't want him to miss another milestone.
I graduate next year and I went to prom, and he's just not here to see this stuff. So I just want anybody who knows anything, who's heard anything, just to speak out and say something and speak up so he can come home.
Anyone who has seen Chad or may have information into his whereabouts is urged to call Anderson County Emergency Dispatch.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Devastating. Very devastating. Where is Chad Carr? Somebody knows what happened to Chad. Somebody knows what happened to him. And as this young lady said, someone needs to come forward and tell where he is. Let me read you a little bit of information from local news pertaining to the disappearance of Chadwick Carr. Thank you. WBIR Channel 10 News is my first source. Family members reported 32-year-old Chad Carr missing almost 2 years ago. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance are troubling to Chad's loved ones. Authorities have generated a few leads in his missing person case. They also said they need the public's help to move forward. Chadwick is just one of 690 people who are unaccounted for in the state of Tennessee. His family joins almost 700 others who have no idea whether their loved one is alive or dead. In 2 years, Chad's mom, Krista Carr, has grown accustomed to waiting. I do not wish this pain on any parent, especially somebody's mom, Krista said. She has photos of Chad spread throughout her home. Most are in frames, some in scrapbooks, and others hung on the wall. He was just the most loving, outgoing person you'd ever want to meet. He always greeted me with hugs and a kiss, Krista said. This was the type of mom and son relationship where we were really close. I always knew what was going on with him, good or bad, and I always willing to help. Chad lived with her for a while during his adult life. The 32-year-old didn't always have it easy, Krista said. Drugs, in a nutshell. Had it not been for that, I think he'd still be here, she said. Chad's sister, Whitney Blue, echoed that. He kept it away from us for so many years. We got a big gist of it, maybe a year and a half before he went missing, Whitney said. However, things were turning around for Chad. He was introduced to a sober living community in Clinton called the Foundation Recovery House. The home is off Rural Dutch Valley Road. The program is 3 months long and Alan Roberts runs it. I wanted to kind of have my own way to help people. It's so important to break that cycle of addiction and to have a place to do that in a recovery community, Alan said. Alan said through the recovery house, Chadwick got connected to employment. He even saved up enough money to buy a van. Everybody really liked him a lot. He's really outgoing, hard work, and he was serious about his recovery, Alan said. He had money saved up. He had bought a vehicle. He was really progressing and working towards moving out. Krista said her son was doing well. The transportation was surprising to me, Krista said. He was really working toward a lot of stuff and doing really well. On May 1st, 2021, everything changed. A phone call between Chad and his sister Whitney would become the last known communication with him. Whitney said she was just calling to check in on him. It wasn't a long conversation. He walked outside and was talking to somebody outside. I'm not sure who it was, Whitney said, but I heard him talking to somebody. I kept calling his name, but he wouldn't reply. Whitney said Chad remained on the line, but seemed to have put down the phone. His voice was faint on the other end. She said he was clearly talking to somebody else, so she hung up the phone. So I hung up and I called back. He didn't answer, she said. That phone call was around 8 p.m. at night, Whitney said. She also said the next day around 3 p.m., one of Chadwick's friends at the recovery house called her to say Chad hadn't shown up for a group meeting in the morning. He also didn't show up for work that afternoon. Ellen said Chad left his phone, wallet, van keys, van, and one flip-flop in the grass at the front of the house. But Chad was nowhere to be seen. I did get kind of scared. I got really scared, Krista said. Allen said the Anderson County Sheriff's Office, alongside other agencies, came out to the recovery house property to search. He said they questioned everyone at there multiple times, including him. There were probably 15 plus police cars there over a 3-day span. They had cadaver dogs, they had Morgan County, Campbell County, and Anderson County deputies who had all come together. They had drones, divers, and people searching everywhere, Allen said. No trace. That the family knows of, Chad's last call was placed to his sister, nobody else. I think somebody did something to Chad. I can't get past that. He's somewhere. You don't just vanish. Whether it's him or just the remains, he is somewhere, Krista said. She spent 2 years waiting to figure out where he is. He's still not here. I'm still going through that. I wake up in the morning and he's still not here. That memory is still fresh, she said. Whitney agreed. It's been hard without her brother. It's the hardest thing I've ever encountered in life, period. It's numb. I'm to the point where I've numbed myself to it, Whitney said. All they want is closure. I can't explain to you how I feel. There's an empty space that needs to be filled, Krista said, and I can't feel it. WBIR News Channel 10 is the source. Thank you for joining me. The content on WATE News 6 puts a correction at the bottom of their article pertaining to CHADWICK CARR. And I want to know why you put a correction on that article, Channel 6 News, about where he was last seen. This information came out 2 years ago that he was allegedly on Central Street, seen on Central Street. So I'm assuming that's your correction. Why even still mention that if this young lady, Whitney says she was the last person to talk to her brother. And I'm assuming she's had his phone records checked, she and the mother. So if the records come back on the phone, she was the last one talking to him, speaking to him, no ongoing phone calls, no outgoing or incoming. Why keep mentioning Central Street? That kind of perturbed me yesterday when I read that news article because they had a correction at the bottom of the article. And I want to know why you're still mentioning him being seen if he wasn't seen on Central Street. And if his sister says she saw him, then I'm going to go with the latter and believe his sister. Let's dissect what the article says pertaining to the disappearance of Chadwick Carr. Nearly 700 people missing from the state of Tennessee. They're either alive or they are dead. This young man stayed on social media, Facebook. And we know that mostly when people aren't on Facebook, it's either their account has been suspended by Facebook, they changed their account, took a break from Facebook, they're sick, or possibly they are deceased. Chadwick appeared to have liked himself a lot. He talked a lot on Facebook, took a lot of photos. So he doesn't strike me as somebody who would fall off. But in the end, a person could if they wanted to. But I believe something tragic has happened to this young man due to the fact his sister says she last talked to him and was on the phone with him when the phone went dead or he was talking to someone. And I also had spoke to someone who said they had saw him that day and he wasn't in the best of shape. And I'm going to go ahead and mention it now that he was under the influence of drugs at that time when the person saw him on that Sunday. And this is also the same day his sister talked to him that night, Sunday evening. So obviously he had relapsed and was still using drugs. So how long was he still using drugs while being in this foundation house? This Mr. Allen that was speaking about his sober living and so on and so forth. Well, I have a problem with you as well. I'd like to know how long you've been running and operating the sober living house, the foundation. Because you were not the person that I know of running it. It was another young lady, Caucasian female, and I have a bag with her too. And I believe something very suspect happened to Chad at this house. And this new information that I got that somebody from the house called Whitney, my understanding was that I thought maybe somebody from the job had called Whitney or somebody else. I can stand corrected. But she says in this article that someone from the foundation house called. I always thought it was like somebody else that had called, not somebody from the house, the foundation house. So 3 o'clock, she gets this call that her brother didn't show up for the morning meeting, and he also didn't show up for work. Very interesting. So naturally, they would have a bed check at this foundation house. Morning meetings, afternoon meetings, depending on the people's schedule that live in the house. 3 o'clock, she gets a call. From the time she was on the phone with them after 8 p.m. to 3 p.m. the next day, she gets a call. I find that strange. I find that very strange. And yes, there were rumors circulating about this house, and I'm going to relay those rumors. My understanding that there was a raid at that house from local authorities. And we all know what a raid means. So were people in the house using drugs or selling drugs at the foundation house? I heard rumors about the Caucasian lady who was running the house, that she was not to be a trusted figure running the house, that she has ties to local law enforcement in that area, Anderson County. And I've heard from separate people who don't even know each other, and none of them had anything good to say about this lady. And I'm going to say it because I don't have anything to lose by getting the truth out there if indeed this is the truth. People were speculating, Miss Lady, that perhaps you have something to do with the disappearance of Chadwick Carr. And it came to my attention from one of the people who last saw him on that Sunday that you liked Mr. Carr. You fancied Mr. Carr, allegedly. And maybe perhaps you had somebody do something to Mr. Carr because he wasn't interested in you. And there was also a Caucasian male who went to Facebook who said not so nice things about you while he was incarcerated. And I don't know all the job details that you have had, job descriptions that you have had, possibly in law enforcement or whatever, but this white male said some very derogatory things about you on Facebook, which got me to wondering who you are, and maybe you shouldn't have been working at the Foundation House. And I don't know if you actually owned the house at that time when he went missing 2 years ago, but you had affiliation with that house. Then I spoke to somebody else, a random person, didn't know me from a can of paint. And the first thing they said to me was, you need to check out that lady who operated the Foundation House. Now imagine that. One person telling me that you like Chadwick Carr, some guy on Facebook ranting and raving about you touching him inappropriately while he was incarcerated, which I didn't really understand that. Didn't know if the guy was cuckoo or what. And then here recently, some random person that I don't even know tells me you need to check into the lady who ran the Foundation House. Ma'am, are you the reason that Chadwick Carr is missing? Did you have somebody hurt or harm him? And this information that he was at the front of the house, flip-flop at the front of the house, phone, van keys, van left behind, wallet left behind. Very interesting. So was he at the front of the house near the door or near the road? I'd like to know. Because there's a difference between I'm standing near the front door versus at the road. Because the house sits up from the road. Somebody in that house did something to Chadwick Carr, and you all who were there working and living covered it up. I do not believe he was in Knoxville, Tennessee. I do not believe his sister is lying that she was on the phone talking to him, because that would be a terrible thing to spread, that you were on the phone with your own brother and you weren't. So I believe her. I believe someone misidentified Chadwick as being on Central Street. Because how would he have gotten to Central and he has a vehicle that he bought the Saturday before he went missing? Make it make sense. So let's chop up what happened to Chadwick Carr. Rumors of a frisky foot proprietor, jealous clients at the house, workers at the house, or somebody pulled up while he was standing at the front of the house or at the road talking. Which is it? Kidnapping, vendetta, what's the truth? All in all, it's those people at that house that know the truth and the workers there. And Mr. Allen, you giving this $2 sympathy and rendition of how Chadwick was a hard worker means nothing to me. Because you all are a party to what happens to him. I believe that. If he wanted to leave that house, he could have left in his own van, not on foot. There are no sidewalks back there. the Queen's been back there. This is rural America. He would have driven his own automobile. So that leaves the people at the house and some random stranger driving by. Take your pick. I had met someone who was at that sober living house. I put two and two together that this person was staying there, and they had called me a few weeks before Chadwick went missing, wanting to be picked up. Now, I had no idea that this person was staying at that house, a male, and it didn't dawn on me until this article came up that Chadwick was missing. And when I saw the address, Dutch Valley Road, that's when it hit me. Okay, this person is staying at that address. So I called the person and asked them if they were staying there. Did they know someone missing from there, the foundation? So he asked me to describe the person, and I described Chadwick being a tall black male, bald-headed, and then he hung up and blocked me. Now, what would you gather from that conversation? Why would someone block me after me asking about Chadwick Carr and giving the description of him? Because he knows what happened to Chadwick Carr. He was there at the time that Chadwick was there because Chadwick took pictures of himself, I believe the same day he went missing. I zoomed in on a photograph posted to Chadwick's Facebook page, and I got a faint glimpse of this person's name on the bulletin board. And that's how I verified that he was staying in that sober living house while Chad was also there. So he knows what happened to Chad. That's why he blocked me. Let me tell you something. To you and whoever else lived at the sober living house, the people who worked at the sober living house and the person running the house, that white lady and this Allen person, karma is a bitch. And what goes around comes around. And you all are covering up possibly the death of a black man who was in dire need of bettering his life and trying to change his life, and perhaps he had a setback and had gotten back, on drugs. You are a party to whatever happened to him at that location. Be it outside in the yard, the front of the yard, at the road. Take your pick. And it has to be a very heavy burden to carry, knowing something happened to him and you have knowledge and you have yet to tell authorities what has happened to him. You don't hear any stories, updates pertaining to the disappearance of Mr. Carr. Why is that? What is law enforcement doing? You hear that they had other agencies helping out. Campbell County, Clinton, drones, divers, very vast land back there. Very rural. And I told you all that when I took a trip back there 2 years ago, I got up on a ridge, which was like a one-way in on a road. And it was the scariest feeling being up there because no cars could come toward me or I would have fallen off a cliff, basically. The first thing came to mind, perhaps Chadwick is back here, discarded. And that's a terrible thing to think of when you don't have all the information, but that is what crossed my mind. That sick feeling I got driving. And the road became more narrow and narrow to where there was only room for one car on the road. And to the right of my car was a drop-off. And my stomach was queasy. And I can't even describe the feeling. It was a very scary feeling. Like getting the shakes, getting chills, just a weird tingly feeling. And I usually get that when I'm driving somewhere where, one, I don't feel safe, I don't feel comfortable, and I'm too close to the edge of the road. Back up through there is nothing but woods. And if someone decided they wanted to take your life and discard you, who would find you? That's my point. And that's the feeling I got when driving on that bridge. And got to a main road, I got reception. And that's even scarier. To be back in there with access to a cell phone and couldn't even use it if I was to have gotten stranded. Did someone hurt Chadwick Carr at that house? I got information 2 years ago that there was a hole in his wall in his room. Is that true? Was that hole there before Chadwick checked in that room, or while he was staying there? Or was there an incident in that room? What happened? What happened in that room, in that house, outside of that house? Those dirty MFs who work there and live there know what happened to Chad. And I'm not saying that everyone's a party to what happened to Chadwick, but they have knowledge that something sinister happened on that property to him. And they're all covering up and they're holding the secret. And that lady who owned it, ran it, whatever, you're a party to this bullshit too, and I know you are. And let me tell you why I know you're a party to it, ma'am. You never spoke once publicly about the disappearance of Chadwick Carr. Why is that? You're running a halfway house, sober living, whatever you want to call it. He entered this home, sober living community on his own. He wasn't mandated by the state or the court to go there. He checked himself in there, which means he could check himself out whenever he wanted to. You're supposed to be responsible for these parties in this house, and yet one of your clients goes missing, and you don't even make a public statement to the news about him missing from your sober living house. Why not? Why not? You're running it, but you don't have nothing to say to the public about the disappearance of your own damn client. Not one time have you ever come forward to speak about Chadwick Carr. Why not? I'll tell you why not. Because you know what the fuck happened to him. And I believe you are the part of the reason. Did you like Chadwick Carr, ma'am? You were interested in him, he wasn't interested in you? Did you have one of those guys do something to him? Were you all selling or using drugs at that house? It's amazing when I talk to the people in the community, most of them didn't even know anything about Chadwick Carr missing, which I found very strange in a small community from Oliver Springs to Clinton, Tennessee. They run right into each other. But when I go to a store and talk to some young people, oh, they got the goods on the halfway house. Imagine that. That's where I got the information about the raid. And maybe that's what was going on at the house. That some of your clients were still using and selling drugs at the house. And maybe that's how and why Chadwick Carr isn't alive. I don't know. But I know something wasn't going on proper at that place. And I've heard nothing but negative things about the lady running the place at that time. So I used deduction. There was hanky-panky going on at a place where people were supposed to be getting their lives together, grown men. And I've been out to this house 2 times in the year of 2021. And what I didn't like was the fact that it looks like a flop house. The day that I went, some white woman running across the lawn, hollering, screaming, children outside the front of the house. What the hell are children doing at a sober living house? That's not a place for children when there are all men there. Especially men with drug problems. Checkmate. The children had no business on the property. Who was that white woman running across the lawn, hollering and screaming? That didn't look appropriate. Looked like they were working on cars in the yard. Just looked like a lot of nonsense to me. I could be wrong. House out in the middle of nowhere. And this is usually the places where things go bump in the night. No eyewitnesses. Nobody's telling anything. And if somebody did hear or see something, they stay mum. And I'm sure you had at least 8 men living in that house at the time of Chadwick's disappearance. And they know exactly what happened to Chadwick. Because they had to have known he didn't go to his room. He wasn't in his room at bed check. He wasn't at any meetings that morning, breakfast. They know exactly what happened to him. And I don't know who laid hands on him, if there was an altercation or arguments, but somebody in that house who was staying in that house and working in that house the month of May 2021, you know exactly what happened to Chadwick Carr. And I don't know how you're walking around holding that secret. But I pray the truth comes out. Somebody comes forward and tells us exactly what happened to Mr. Carr. And I hate to think that he is no longer alive, but from the things I've heard about him, his disposition, looking at his Facebook posts, he doesn't strike me as somebody who would just fall off and stay gone away from his family, leave behind his wallet, keys, car, phone. He doesn't strike me as somebody who would do that. Was Chadwick Carr harmed at the foundation house by the clients in the house, the proprietor, and the workers? Or did some random bloke come through and he was near the road talking to his sister and he was kidnapped, assaulted, and then discarded? What is the truth? You see, I always tell people, if you want to get to the bottom of the truth, you always start at the beginning of the story. That is where the truth lies. And at the beginning of the story, Chadwick was breathing and talking to his sister on a phone at that property. And she faintly hears him talking to somebody else, and he's not responding to her. She hangs up, calls back. He doesn't answer. So what happened after Whitney hung up the phone? That is where the truth lies. And then the next day, she gets a call from somebody from the house saying Chadwick did not make bed check or the morning meeting or show up to work. How about that? I'd like to know the conversations that took place that night at bed check, the morning meeting. Did his job call the sober living house to ask where Chad was? Who did his employer call to say Chad had not made it to work? Who at the sober living house called? Who did they call to ask where Chad was? Obviously, whoever ran the house didn't call Whitney, didn't call his mother. Somebody at the house called. Who was that person? And was that person close to Chadwick Carr? So you have to ask all the pertinent questions. Who was the person that called Whitney? What was his relationship with Chadwick? Did he like him? Was he friends with him? Was he a bedmate, a roommate? shared the same room. How did he get her phone number? Stay woke, everybody. Or did he go on his phone and found the number to call Whitney? See, I always ask pertinent questions because that's where the truth lies. How did the person get her number to call her? You just scroll through all his phone numbers? Or was there a contact number on a bulletin board? Why wasn't somebody in official capacity not calling Whitney or his mother? See, that's where I have a problem. And if somebody called, I can stand corrected. But the article says somebody from the house called. Friend called. So I'd like to know, is this somebody he was really friends with? And how did they know to call Whitney? Did he talk about his sister in the months that he was there? And how would they have gotten her number to call? And why didn't someone in official capacity from the halfway house call Whitney or his mother? Did they call his job? One of the workers? And the workers have to be in on it as well. Because you're the one who would do the bed checks for the clients. So how many men were staying at the halfway house that night when he last talked to his sister? And are any of them involved in the disappearance of Chadwick Carr? Was there an argument? Animosity? Somebody was angry with him? Was there an issue about money owed? Was this about drugs? Was somebody there selling drugs to him? He owed them money. Or was he selling drugs there? Were they using drugs in the house? You have to ask all those questions because this is a sober living house. And obviously the person who I met briefly ended up at that house because he had a drug problem. And one night he called me, as I said weeks before this incident of Chadwick Carr's disappearance, wanting to be picked up, but he never told me where he was. And I didn't put two and two together until Newsbreak sent me a notification of a missing Black man from that location. And I put two and two together. Imagine that. I want to thank you for your time. If you have any information pertaining to the disappearance of Chadwick Carr, please contact the Clinton Police Department and or Sheriff's Department, TBI. Don't hold a secret. Secrets are dangerous. And he has family and friends. And as you heard this young lady, she misses him and wants someone to come forward to give information to his whereabouts. And that was very noble of him to take her to a dance years beforehand, as you saw in the video. She'll be graduating high school next year. And obviously she was fond of Chadwick Carr. Somebody knows what happened to him. Somebody knows the truth. And somebody's holding the lie. And as I said, what goes around comes around. That you holding that lie, you and how many others at that house and anywhere else, you may be one day in Chad's predicament. And you would want someone to come forward and tell the truth about you. You wouldn't want your family and friends wondering where you are. I do believe foul play is involved. I do not know if law enforcement is doing an adequate job in trying to find out what happened to Mr. Carr. But I always say that when you don't have information released to the public pertaining to a person's disappearance or a person's murder, I'm not saying he was murdered, but just saying when a person is murdered and there's no information by news, no information from law enforcement, it's 9 times out of 10, it was orchestrated and deliberate. And I have a funky feeling this was a deliberate crime against Mr. Carr. Somebody had a problem with him and they exacted that problem the night he was speaking to his sister. And they didn't give two fucks that he was on the phone with his sister. So that should tell you something right there. They hurt that boy at that house. Nobody can make me believe different. And they got rid of him. And I believe Chadwick Carr is somewhere out there in Clinton and Oliver Springs discarded. Because it's 2 years later now, and he has made no contact with the house, the public, or his family. Those people at that house, those clients, they hurt him. And the workers, they're in on it as well. And the white lady who was running the house, I can't remember her name, she's involved too. They're all involved. If you'd like to donate to this great network, $sign Big Angie, 129 Cash App, stickers and chats are welcome during the live stream. Thank you for your time. Please take the polls on my community board. I have news updates and breaking news on the community page. Please check out my extensive library of videos. This story is so baffling to me. No news updates, no nothing. Somebody knows what happened to that young man. And I don't care what anybody says. He was hurt at that house. I believe that. And if it's not the clients, the workers at the house, and he was at the road, I'll make sure I make this clear, then somebody came through. Either that he was waiting on, calling, and they took him. It's one or the other. Thank you for your time. You have been listening to The Vault XL. Prayers to the Carr family.